dreams are something you do by yourself. You ever have a dream and then try to tell somebody the dream you had? You wake up and be like, hey, here's what I was dreaming. And they be like, really, really? So unicorns and then what happened? That's the same thing as saying, I want to do something besides be what's already planned out. Plumber, doctor, lawyer, dentist, there's a plan. This thing here is like a leap of faith and you just keep falling. Now, to answer your question, what I'm trying to do is be righteous. And when I say righteous, I don't mean God, God righteous. I mean, just when I wake up, I know I was honest to myself. You know what I mean?
All right, here we go. Video number 2. I'm still trying to do this pretty, candidly, impromptu and whatnot, to really make things seem like a discussion. And I'm still trying to figure out the content. The direction I'm taking my channel. I still haven't really figured that out, but I'm still gonna make or use this pattern of making videos and stuff until I figure that out. Because if nothing else, this is therapeutic for me, because it allows me to just kind of put my thoughts down on pen and paper, and just help me advance my thinking process and philosophize about things. It's I think it's helpful. I think it's helping, and I definitely think if more people did it, it would help improve their lives and perspective on things. You could take a step back and look at things from a different perspective.
Kind of felt good, didn't it?
Is this real life?
Yeah, this is real life.
Okay, now I have 2 fingers.
But the video clip that I just played was of Patrice O'Neal. If y'all haven't heard of him, he's got like a cult following now. Like, the perspective he had and whatnot is a very interesting one, especially when it came to dating and being a man and women and whatnot. And on this particular clip, he was talking about he wanted to be righteous. And the interesting thing about that is, like he said, he didn't mean like in a godly way.
I execute judgment on you, COVID-19.
Or like, what normally comes to mind when you hear that word, he meant righteous in the sense that he was doing what was right by himself. And like, that's kind of like the subject I wanted to hit on for this video. Not so much righteousness as, the way he talks about it, you could actually call that integrity. And that's what I want to talk about, but not just the definition of integrity itself, but kind of like the nuances and the connotations and the ways we use these words and definitions and things, particularly when it comes to like a virtue, how we use that in everyday life, and what it really means to us, how we interpret it. And that's really what I wanted to hit on. And what kind of sparked this was the fact that me and a friend were having a conversation about dating and whatnot, and cheating, and whether it was right or wrong. And I'm not gonna get into that part, because if anyone does happen to watch my videos and whatnot, and especially women, I was like, I was on the side where like I think you should cheat, or I won't say it that strongly, but I was on the side of more of like, it's hard to explain, but basically just that you shouldn't quell your desire immediately upon meeting a relationship, getting in a relationship with someone. You know what I mean? You put all your eggs in the basket and whatnot. And basically, he was on the side like, no, like that's not right. Like, you should put all, not necessarily put all your eggs in the basket, but you should dedicate yourself completely to the relationship, basically for the sake of the relationship. And
what is a simp? Urban Dictionary defines a simp as a man that puts himself in a subservient / submissive position under women in hopes of winning them over, without the female bringing anything to the table. A man that puts too much value on a female for no reason. A man that prides himself with chivalry in hopes of getting sexual gratification from women. Chances are, if you've spent any time on the internet in the past 3 months, you've probably been called a simp for doing literally anything related to women. Sorry, bitches. Related to bitches.
Integrity. And that's like how that kind of led into that. And of course, like the kind of mindset I've developed, I wanted to challenge that. You know what I mean? I wanted to, you know what I mean? Not push the issue, but you know what I mean? I immediately had the mindset to challenge that thought, as of particularly it got into, if you cheat and you didn't get caught or you didn't tell the person, you had no integrity. And I challenged that, and I challenged the definition of integrity specifically, and that's how this all kind of connects and whatnot. And we were having like a long conversation and whatnot, and the reason being is because, like, when you look at words and how we define them, oftentimes there's multiple definitions and there's multiple ways it can be used. But when you really break the word down, especially in its origins, from which languages it was derived from and things like that, you kind of get this core, kind of like this core idea of the word that kind of, no matter in what way you figuratively use that word, there's like a core idea behind it that's almost unshakable, so as long as you use that language, like where it derived from. And that leads into like a whole nother concept and whatnot, where ideas, you know what I mean, like words and definition, there's like an actual idea, and like that idea is an entity in itself. And I'll get more into that, but back to the core definition of things. You know, at least this is how I am coming to rationalize and the thinking I'm having behind this. And I feel like there's generally some truth, or I'm generally accurate about, like, there's a core, kind of like a core definition behind, kind of like a core definition behind that word. So regardless of what context you have, there's like this, you know what I mean, there's this, I'm trying to distill it. There's, you know what I mean, like, there's just, to put it simply, there's like a core definition that you can't really get. It's still underlying and subtly there. So for instance, let me give an example. The word insane. When you look at that word insane, and you know, most people know what the word insane, and it can have a lot of different contexts, or at least it can be applied in a lot of different ways. Like, you call someone insane and blase blase, like, you're not necessarily, in other situations you might not necessarily think the person is absolutely crazy, but you're saying like he's insane and having this particular thought or performing whatever action. And regardless of how you use it, if you get down to the origins of insane, like, it's pretty much derived from the word in, and I think like the Latin language, like, I'm not gonna try to get too accurate and look up definitions, because, you know, that would ruin like the impromptu method of, you know, of how I'm even making this video. But in general, you know, I have done some research, I have looked up the word. And like, the root of it is in, which means not, basically, like, not something isn't. And then you have sane. You have the sane, and that basically means healthy or health. And so basically when you put those words together, you get not healthy. And now that's important because when you say that in context, not figuratively or in context, this often applied to the mind, which we all know in general, if someone is genuinely crazy, there's usually some problem with their mental health or their health overall. The mind and body is connected. You can't really separate those two. So when you say the person is insane, you're saying their mind is not healthy, and I guess in essence. And that's kind of like the underlying meaning to not be healthy in some form or fashion. And so once you see like a philosopher say something like Marcus Aurelius, and he says the goal in life is not to be a part of the majority, it's to not be among the ranks of the insane. And once you look at that, and then once you really look at like the definition between being insane, that saying suddenly becomes far more profound when you think about all the connotations and what he could actually mean, like on which side, who's the insane side, or so forth and so forth. And I probably butchered that quote, but that's generally what he said. And so now with that example, that's kind of like how I'm pointing out and going about when I look at the word integrity and how that applies to our everyday life and what we're doing. Because like often when people say, oh, you have integrity, this person has integrity, or that person has no integrity, they often mean like this person is honest or he doesn't lie.
So, what do you do with this thing?
I drink people.
Were you trying to drink me?
No. Yes.
You feel that? That's what honesty feels like.
And so forth. And the thing about that is it's somewhat misleading because, by default, we're not perfect creatures. We're not perfect people. We make mistakes, and that's generally how we learn. We learn from our mistakes. Well, I shouldn't say generally, but that's too strong. But we learn a lot from our mistakes. That it's a process. Trial and error is a process that we use often, and we're not perfect, and we get manipulated or influenced by a number of different things. So to assume that integrity had something to do with a person not ever lying, or being completely honest all the time is, like that's would almost be impossible. And of course, it's figurative, of course. Like no one expects someone to not ever lie, and so technically you could say someone has an integrity even if they make a mistake and so forth. But that's where I challenge the issue, because now if you get into the actual core of integrity, and actually let me first kind of give a little bit of insight on like the discussion we were having. And the discussion we were having, he was saying like, if you lie, you don't have integrity. If you lie to your spouse, or if you cheat and just don't tell your spouse, you have no integrity. And I said, in the way I argued is that's not necessarily true, because technically, if they were to have never found out about something, you would have never done any harm to them. And like that, That's a sticky, and a lot of people will see that as deceitful. But I'm really sticking on the core of what being having integrity and what integrity has. So you look at what integrity really means, and in general, or in essence, it means to be whole. Like is derived from integer, which is a whole, and you have fractions and all that stuff, but that's not related per se. You have integrity, and it means to be whole. Wholesomeness, the act of being whole. And then figuratively, that's taken a little bit further, in the sense that a person who's whole would act the same in public or in private.
Can't let Dad see me playing hooky.
I can't let the boys see me skipping work.
Good afternoon.
How do you do, sir?
Now, when you think about what that means, that's also kind of taken figuratively to mean like that you would always be yourself at all times, and thus you would always be honest as long as you were yourself. And so figuratively you take that another step forward, and they're saying a person who has integrity would not lie or scheme. He would not deceive an individual, because people want to assume that everyone is good, like everyone is naturally good. Now, once you take it another step forward, it has been taken another step forward, and it's kind of comes from like that Christian side of things, or the Christian belief, and it had a connotation applied to it in the sense that if you were a man of integrity, or if you had integrity, you would also have God, and you would be one with God, as in if you were whole, you would be with the will of God. And so if you did something that God, particularly like in Moses and the commandments and stuff, disagreed with or did not approve of, then you couldn't be whole, you couldn't have integrity, because if you weren't, like I said, one with God, or you didn't follow the will of God, then you couldn't be one with Him. And without God, you couldn't be whole. Like that's like kind of like the Christian belief of it. And so that definition and those things are taken further and further, and so these connotations and figurative ways of thinking about it and going about it is applied, and people continue this trend. And, you have all these societal influences and whatnot, people in this path of thinking. Now, here's the catch though: it always meant, or originally it only meant to be whole, and no matter how much it is pervaded, it will always have that underlying meaning somewhere in there. Like you can't take away that. And so the interesting part about what I wanted to discuss is that there's a lot of people, I think Alan Watts is one to say it many times, and back to what I said about certain words and definitions being like an idea, and especially through language. Alan Watts said, when you learn a language and you speak, you grow up with this language, you also accept the prejudices of this language. So all the connotation I said with Christian and blah 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 and all that underlies, subconsciously you take on this once you learn how to speak that language. And you can see that when you compare languages. For instance, there are some thoughts and feelings that Japanese people can only express in Japanese, and when they try to find, and they may completely understand the English language, but when they try to think in that matter or find the direct translation in English, they cannot, because like I said before, those prejudices, like there's that core meaning of words and languages that you can't really remove from the words. And so if there wasn't a word or meaning that kind of correlates to that idea, you couldn't just immediately find that word and translate that in another language, because the idea is not there. In essence, that's what I'm trying to say. And so back to the integrity point, what I really feel like now is, when you look at what people claim is integrity, and someone that has integrity, their thought or definition of it has been pervaded, and it has a very figurative connotation to it. But if you go back to what actually integrity meant as a whole, you look at it and then you try to apply it to situations. And in reality, because of the Christian belief in evil and negativity, that's been applied to integrity. But in reality, integrity, you could be whole and also be a bad person.
La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. I think I'm about to steal.
That was kind of the idea I was trying to argue with my friend. You could be a bad person, you could still have integrity, because you could still be true to yourself, and you could still be completely whole. You could be a complete person and be exactly the same in no matter situations. Like, to say, if your nature was to lie or be evil, in a sense, you would be having integrity if you stayed that. And if you went against that for a reason other than you actually wanted to, then you wouldn't have integrity. You wouldn't be whole. So, for instance, like, you could kind of say that a lot of things people don't do, it's because of laws. Not because they necessarily don't want to do them, it's because they fear the consequences. There are consequences for your actions and repercussions, and the fear of that prevents people from doing a lot of things. But you will realize quickly that if those repercussions and consequences are taken away, then people they will do those things. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like cheating. How you look at cheating, and a lot of people will do it, or if they didn't get caught, or they don't feel bad about it until they got caught. So you look at like integrity, and what I just said about you could be a bad person and still have integrity, like being true. And so that's another reason why I chose the clip with Patrice O'Neal, because he said, I want to be honest to myself when I wake up in the morning. And so the idea I was trying to express is that integrity wasn't so much about the focus on just not lying or being completely honest to everyone, but being whole and one with yourself. And so that whole, if you lie, you don't have integrity, or if you be bad, or if you're negative, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not one with God, you don't have integrity. That's more figurative. But the idea behind integrity, that entity, is wholeness, oneness. So oneness is too. I think it's pervading. I'd say just wholeness. Being exactly who you are at all times. And so, like, if you look at, okay, what's kind of considered the opposite of integrity, I guess figuratively considered the opposite, is like corruption. You look at corruption, or to corrupt and whatnot, and it's often related with defiling or ruining something, destroying something, and because of that, it's immediately given a negative connotation. But I mean, when you really get into the roots of corruption, or to corrupt something, it's more of the act of just breaking something down, or what's the way to put it, or taking apart or ruining the wholeness of something. So, for instance, like, okay, and this is what's the way to put it? I think this way of thinking is, of course, outside the norm, in the sense that corruption and corrupt, when you think of tearing apart and ruining something, it almost always is going to have like a negative context to it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, in general. But there are instances where to corrupt something, for instance, let's say let's say you have something that was inherently evil, and then you remove a part of it and put in something good. Technically, you would be corrupting what that evil originally was. That would be corruption in the sense that um, the you are removing or breaking down the core or the foundation of what that thing was. And so when you think about integrity, it's not just being honest. It's not just about being good, because once you try to look at something as good or bad, just good or bad, like black or white, it you complicate things, and it's real hard to look at things in a black or white all the time. In reality, what you see is that there's more of a gray area when things when we go about things. There's more of a gray area. Um, yeah, or more to let's more to say that when you look at a positive, negative, they're both there's purpose for both, and you really can't have one without the other. In essence, so they're two sides of the same coin. Like many people, you know what I mean? Well, many philosophers and people that have speeches, they will have that sentiment where negativity is essential. You know what I mean? You have like Carl Jung and incorporating your shadow. Like look into that. What he speaks of is incorporating your shadow, conquering it, and learning how to use it. You're becoming whole. You're essentially becoming a whole by learning how to incorporate the darker parts about you into your personality. And in that sense, you would have true integrity. That's really what will make you integrous, if that's a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's integrity. And then Friedrich Nietzsche or Nietzsche, I don't know, I have no idea how to say his name, but he kind of has similar sentiments and about the dark side of people. It really is a part of us. But when you looked at integrity and how it was taken figuratively, it was kind of like removing the negativity from a person, and that's what it means to be integrous. And I just don't believe that. And so, you know what I mean? And then that draw back to the cheating part, whereas I don't think necessarily like you didn't have integrity just because you cheated and didn't tell your partner or blah blah blah. Because if it was technically in your nature to cheat, then you would be doing what you really actually wanted. And there's so much more to that, you know what I mean? So that's why I said I won't really go down that trail, because there's so much more things that are important in a relationship, and there's intimacy and all kinds of things. But yeah, I just kind of, I wanted to focus on the integrity part because, well, you look at it further, like, okay, so now back to the idea, and kind of like the, I want to say, the conclusion I wanted to come to with all this, is if you look at certain words and definitions, some thoughts, and ideas in an actual entity, I really think it's one reason why it's so hard for us to embody these ideas and whatnot, and these virtues, especially like these virtues, when it comes to virtues and morals, why we seem to have why I think so many people have trouble sticking to these. And one, it's kind of like what Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche says, is that they aren't willing to accept that this is a part of themselves. But another what I'm hypothesizing is the fact that because we've taken these words figuratively and we've pervaded them and we've put this figurative connotation on it, and then we've come to all accept this without really getting to the heart or the idea of integrity, or what else could be considered a virtue, whatever else, you know what I mean? I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but we can't embody these because what we understand about it has actually been pervaded. And if we, for instance, once again, more people would have and show it the act and quality of integrity if they understood it was more about being honest in their actions and honest to themselves, being whole and doing. I shouldn't say doing what they want, but following the I guess you could say, or oh, I know a good way to put it. It would be saying like just being true to your own foundation and things you believe in. It's more integrity than about lying or being honest. And I think it's those pervasions that prevents us from really embodying that and absorbing that into our being, because figuratively we've taken it and pervaded it ultimately. And that's not to say that that's bad or anything. It's just that inconsistency is what causes us so hard to have, what causes us to have that trouble in really setting guidelines for ourselves and sticking to them. And if we really were able to embrace the idea, then we would be able to better adhere to it. You know what I mean? You'd have more people that were that showed integrity, and you'd have more trustworthy people, and you'd have, you know what I mean? It sounds kind of pessimistic, but it's like you could trust in someone knowing that, okay, this person is a thief. You know what I mean? Like, this person is going to steal, so like you could still accept this individual and be like, okay, like I know what parameters I should within what parameters I should act around you. Like, okay, you're a thief and you're honest about it. I know you. I know this is what I'm dealing with. I know a snake's a snake. You know what I mean? And we could accept that. But like, for instance, okay, to give an example, and I'm using my friend, and he probably gonna watch this video and bash me for it, but like at the same time, he said, you know what I mean, the reason why he doesn't want to cheat or do anything like that is because he wanted to have integrity, and he wanted to, you know, display that quality in relationships. But then on the same token, like we were discussing like darker matters and just what I know of him in general, I would call him out on that and be like, wait a minute, what are you talking about integrity? And you'll do this. And his excuse is like, oh, I never said I had integrity. And my rebuttal pretty much is, well, then why do you see it, I shouldn't say necessary, but why do you want to seek integrity in certain aspects of your life and not others? And that thought process leads to conflict within yourself, because you'll rationalize not having integrity or doing something wrong in this other, or excuse it, but in another instance you want to try to display integrity, but in reality you're conflicted because integrity is all about wholeness in the first place. And because because you don't understand the idea of it, you'll never achieve it. But if you were to actually be honest or about what you want to do, or you actually cheated, because I mean, like, he might not admit it, but like every guy does. And it's like, if you were actually, you don't necessarily have to partake in those urges, but if you actually acknowledge them and whatnot, you would actually be showing integrity then. And the fact that he could even consider integrity when he was doing all this other, when he would admit and have all these other conflicting ideologies and things that he would do, it's like there's a problem there. Like, you create conflict there, and whether you know it or not, subconsciously you are absorbing this, and this is your thought process. So it leads to a conflicted person overall, where you can't really display these true qualities of morals and virtues, because you can basically make these exceptions and excuses or there's a word I'm trying to use, but it's escaping me. But basically, you can somehow take it and separate when it's okay to do something and when it's not. When you want to be integrous and when you don't, and that's not how it will work. Ultimately, the idea of integrity, I don't think that's how it will work. But generally, that's what I was trying to convey to him, and we never really came to a resolution about that, but because we kind of just, we talk about, me and him, we talk about all kinds of things, but yeah, that was ultimately like the subject of the video. But and take a little further also, and now something else hit me about the idea of integrity and thoughts and stuff, ideas being an entity in themselves. If I'm not mistaken, Buddhists kind of have this sentiment too. Like it's everywhere, and I think there's something to it. I just think in society, this level of critical thinking is rarely done. Like we rarely consider like the roots and the language we were given. Like, you know what I mean? Like literally the language we were given. Like how much influence that had on developing our psyche and like who we are and what we believe in. And if we actually took the time to do that, you know what I mean? Like we would probably come to a much better understanding of why people do what, or you'd have more of a unified culture, I guess, or maybe people would just be better. I guess maybe we just be better people. But yeah, I don't really know how to wrap this up, but if anyone does, care to read, what I mean, listen to the conversation, let me know what your thoughts is and your talking points, because I'm more than willing to have an open discussion about this, and in response, I could definitely better put my thoughts together. But like I said, I wanted to keep this candid. You know what I mean? I wanted to make it feel personal, like I was actually having a discussion with y'all. And but yeah, that's the end of the video. Y'all take it easy.